watching Property TV.
Hello, welcome to Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin, and this is the programme where you can have your property-related questions answered by our team of experts. And joining me today is Hayley Andrews. Hayley, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Hayley is a property developer, investor, and mentor, I think. Is that a good description?
Yeah, I'd say that's a fair
Good.
description.
Okay. And on your right, joining us for the first time is Richard Murray, CEO of Eurolink, who are providers of Vico estate agency software. Welcome to you, Richard.
Thank you very much.
We'll try and be gentle with you.
Please do, yeah.
It's your,
Please.
First time.
With your first show. And if you get anything wrong, don't worry, we'll just scrub it out. Okay.
Works for me. Works for me.
All right. Hayley, I'm going to start with you. I'm a tenant in an HMO property shared with 7 other people. The rooms are cold and the room temperature drops because of drafts coming through non-double glazed windows. And in fact, the heating thermostat is centrally controlled, but it's covered by a locked thermostat cage installed by the landlord. Is there anything we can do to insist that we'll be allowed to set the room temperatures ourselves?
Okay.
It's quite topical at this time of year, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? And it's quite a big issue for HMO landlords and tenants alike. So great topic, great question. So the Institute of Environmental Health states that the tenant should be able to regulate the temperature in their dwelling. That being said, it's not that clear cut. So the landlord has to provide heating between 19 and 22 degrees. And it really is going to come down to tenant management. It's also going to come down to a contract as well. So there are lots of, we always come back to contracts, don't we? What's in the AST? So a lot of landlords will have what's called a fair usage policy. With many HMOs, all bills are included. And of course, abuse of using the gas, electricity all the time excessively, which happens a lot with HMOs, of course, can be the difference between profit and loss for the landlord and the investor. So it's really going to come down to tenant management. So I actually have smart systems within my properties, my HMOs. So we use an OWL system, and there's various different products on the market. And we also use a TADO system, which is attached. It's a thermostat that's attached to the unit within their room, which regulates the temperature in that room.
Okay.
I think the issue with locking the boxes away, and we don't do that, is the thermostat is in a central point and then doesn't necessarily control the temperature throughout the whole of the
Doesn't
house.
reflect the general temperature.
It doesn't, yes, exactly. So there are smarter ways of doing that, but it's not illegal for the landlord to actually put a lockbox over the thermostat. So I would say to the tenant, check your AST, have the conversation with the landlord, try and come up with a better plan. It also comes down to the other people that are within the property as well. It's a large HMO, you can't please everyone. Some people think it's too hot, some people think it's too cold. The issue with not having some sort of system like that for a HMO landlord, the reason I now have them in place is because it was abused. I would go round to my HMOs in the beginning of my journey, and the heating would be on full blast throughout the winter. The windows would be open and the tenants would be walking around in flip-flops and shorts. So they are literally throwing money out of the window. So it does need to be controlled. It is a serious issue for HMO landlords, but there is a better way of doing it than putting a lockbox on the thermostat in a central location.
It is difficult when you're dealing with a lot of people. I mean, I live in a building here which has comfort cooling, comfort heating through fan coils.
Yeah.
And I see on the various blogs a lot of people complain, why am I being charged this much for my heating and cooling? And the people go around and inspect, and they've got the heating on sort of full blast, windows wide open, everything just disappearing out the window, and you've got a conflict of temperatures.
Well, there's so many. I mean, my tenants can actually control the heating by pressing a boost button, so it's still monitored remotely and set set times, the heating comes on at set times throughout the day. That conversation is had with the household as well, so it's in line with different shifts and things like that. And it's set to a temperature of between 19 and 22, which is the guidelines. But if the tenant is cold, they can regulate that temperature themselves by pressing the boost button. With the system, which sounds like the caller has within their property that the landlord is installed, is they've actually locked the thermostat away.
I think there's two things here, isn't there? One, this is a prime example of good landlord investment paying off.
Yes.
And solving more than one
and good
problem.
tenant management as well, you know.
Let me ask you this: if they don't come to some agreement with their landlord, if there is a problem and the landlord's being particularly difficult and they're perhaps being seen as being difficult too, who is the arbitrator in this case? Is it the local council to issue the HMO licence? So
they probably would report you to the council first and foremost, so to be private sector housing, more than likely. But it's a contract. Again, at the end of the day, it's going to depend what's in that contract. I would arguably say if there's a fair usage policy within that contract, then if the tenant is prepared to make the additional payment to have the heating at a higher level or on for longer periods of time, then they are well within their rights to do that. What we actually do with our systems, and I can only comment on, you know, my own portfolio here, is we monitor, so we can actually see when that boost button is being pressed and actually alter and change. So we can monitor the behaviour of the tenants and make it more efficient by doing that. Okay. And I think that's what we do well. But we've had to do that out of needing to do that because it was abused. So there's two sides to every story. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Richard, I'm guessing you haven't got a lot to say about that subject.
Only that there's, from a software perspective or a property management software perspective, again, whether it's landlord or agent, there are specific compliance requirements that I would always advise the tenants to make sure you know what those what those are, and make sure that your landlord and your agent is complying with them.
Sure. Okay, good. Well, Richard, your first question on the show then. And I'll give a little bit of an explanation to this question after I ask a bit. Do the panel think that the ever-increasing digital integration could actually harm the property business? We're already seeing that central registration of valuations could take away the opportunity of obtaining a genuinely independent assessment of values, possibly to the detriment of the borrower. Now, I've looked into this question a little bit before the show, and I think what we're trying to get at here is, for instance, where you have a number of the big surveying firms centrally register their values that they've done in certain areas, it's becoming an ever-increasing regular habit for valuers to just not do a valuation, but just look on the computer at what's been given before and say, that's our valuation. And I don't really feel that fits with the sort of Red Book ethos of getting an independent valuation, especially when it comes to borrowing, because the consequences for a potential borrower are quite serious. You know, it can mean a hugely inflated deposit that's required. So it's quite an interesting question, and I'm sure you've got the answer.
Well, I think, in my opinion, it's all about data, and I think the more data that's centralised, the better, because in our world, we are trying to build technology that complements people. And ultimately, anything that can help people make a better decision has got to be an advantage. Although the flip side to that, as you say, is that where you're centralizing data and information without the option of an appeal, let's say, I guess it would be fair to say it could cause some problems, as you say, with borrowers and not getting the right information. But I think what I would suggest is the pros outweigh the cons in general terms of digitalization. And as I said, for me, centralizing data, having access to lots of different sources of data should complement any property professional's daily working life.
Okay. I mean, you're talking to somebody who spent most of his life arguing with valuers, I think, in terms of sort of property development, so sort of inspections. And it is a difficult one. You also have to take into account that certain valuers who are quite often employed by the big lenders who are doing these multiple valuations at 10 a day or this sort of thing for very low fees are purposely undervaluing to stay away from getting anywhere near their insurance liabilities in terms of getting it wrong. The easy way is to undervalue and then you're not in any sort of conflict. And I suppose one of the pluses of the digitalisation could be to come away from that, because if you get too big a disparity, it's going to start showing, isn't it? But it's an interesting question, and it spreads more. Even if you look at the now various operations of some totally online estate agencies, I just wonder. Property's always been a fairly personal sort of business. People like human contact. They like to talk to a knowledgeable agent, and a lot of this online stuff takes you away from that, doesn't it? What do you think, Hayley?
I think it definitely has its place, and the more data that we can collect and have access to, obviously the better for us as professionals. But I do agree that there is a place for it, and it's not the only solution. I would much rather have a physical valuation carried out on an investment that I'm looking to purchase than a digital one.
I think the fashionable expression is it's a drive-by valuation.
Yeah. So I mean, like you said, it's not. If it is digital, yes, there's information to back that up, and that will be looked at regardless of whether it is physical or a digital evaluation anyway. But I would always choose to have a physical valuation carried out.
Okay.
Without a doubt.
On that note, that's all we've got time for in this half of the show. So join me again after the break.
You are watching Property TV. You are watching Property TV.
Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Property Question Time. Joining me are Richard Murray and Hayley Andrews. Welcome back, guys. Your second question then, Hayley. What would the panel consider to be the top 3 hotspots in the UK for buy-to-let investment, and why would they suggest those areas? I'll keep you going for a minute or two, won't it?
How long have we got? Okay, so it really does depend on what you're looking for, really. So whether you're looking for, whatever you're looking for. But if you're looking for decent gross rental yield and a balance between that and capital appreciation, I would say the 3 areas that I would, and I actually research the whole of the UK on a quarterly basis and then review it on an annual basis as well, so that I can have a look at trends and see where to move into across the UK. So I would say Nottingham is performing very well at this moment in time and has been for quite some time now. I would say Birmingham in the Black Country. Actually, the West Midlands overall performs very well.
And where are you from, Hayley?
I'm from Birmingham in the Black Country. I didn't put that first, did I? I said Nottingham first.
Just thought I'd ask.
East Midlands. East Midlands, Nottingham, Birmingham in the Black Country, and Southampton. The reason I choose those 3 as my top 3, I would say, I could go more than 3, I normally do 5, but we'll stick with 3, is because you've got a good decent yield, so gross yield of up to around 12%. And if you look at a 5-year growth, you're looking at anywhere from between 15 and 37% uplift in value. So capital appreciation. So you've got a really good balance there. Also, if you're checking out, population, is that increasing? Is it declining? Employment, government infrastructure plans and regeneration, they all have a lot going on at this moment in time.
Well, they did until this morning's news that HS2 is not going ahead. Yeah.
Well, HS2, so if you look at Birmingham in the Black Country, if you look at the Birmingham City Plan, for example, that's creating 50,000 new jobs, the 5,000 new houses with a view of recreation, restaurant, bringing families back into the area. And that's going to be contributing 2.1 billion to the economy year on year. So you're looking at areas like that, and you want to really get in before it happens so that you can ride that wave. But that's very much what I focus on. I don't just look at cash flow and income. I also look at the capital uplift year on year and the growth of that area.
How do you judge? I think the questioner here has asked something that's a bit of an impossible task, which is to actually identify why you pick these particular areas, because it must be a changing feast all the time.
Well,
but I mean, the real point is, if you see, for instance, attractive planning schemes being put in, development areas being identified, envelopes, to develop, at what stage would you go in? Because the development process is quite a long time.
Yes, it is. So it has to work from day one. So you have to be happy from day one. So although we'll look at the forecast for capital appreciation and hope for that, we can't guarantee it. So we don't count that when we're looking at our return on investment. Well, I don't personally. I know that lots of people do. That I see as a bonus. So it has to work for me from day one. We have the view of that obviously rising year on year over a 5-year period, and that's what we normally look at. We've got evidence to back that up. But again, I buy below market value, add value, force appreciation, and then obviously look at the income off the back of it. So I'm almost creating that equity myself. But I still look at areas that will give me that capital growth as well as the income from a rental yield.
I just wonder if the slight danger is the sort of thing that's happened here. With Crossrail in London, for instance, it's now running, I think, 5 years behind schedule.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you the amount of people that told me they piled in when it was all announced to buy properties at the various stop points of Crossrail. They've probably got a hard time for this last 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course, all of this creates buzz, which pushes up the prices in that area. So it's, where do you get in? You want to get in before it's happening, but you want to know that it's going to happen. So you can look at government infrastructure plans and regeneration and have a look at the progress and whether it's, approved or in progress, or, so you can check that out.
Now, one of our colleagues who regularly appears on the programme, Mr. Howard, would tell me off for saying this, but why have you missed London out?
I'm not London centric like you. You don't get great income, I think, from London. So you get great capital gains.
Well, exactly,
I do think that with the likes of HS2 and the government infrastructure plans that are throughout the whole of the UK, if you look at it on a UK base, I do think that in the not too distant future, we are going to see more of an even market throughout the UK rather than north versus south.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Although the government do seem to be retreating from that sort of
well, time will tell, won't
process.
it? But that's what. So if you're investing purely for capital growth, London's your place to be, or even Edinburgh. The major city centres are the place to be. But if you're looking at a good balance between income and capital appreciation, there are other places to invest.
Okay. Richard, does your software solve any of this?
Well, I sort of see it as just listening to Hayley. I think the investment side, and that you can only control what you can control, which is you presented with some knowledge, you're presented with the information, the balance between yield and capital growth makes perfect sense to me as an investor. I would say it's an extension of what we talked about in part one of this show. Having all the information, having that centralized data. I think pre-pandemic, your data's definitely more up to date, but looking pre-pandemic, which was that normalized data, if you like, it was Manchester, Cambridge, London.
Yeah.
That's just data. Then you take everything that Hayley's saying, then you add what you're saying, and actually you make a decision then. You make an informed decision.
Yeah.
Manchester's top of the tree because 30% of people in Manchester rent. And all the data suggests that is a good place to invest. But then you take your own decision as an investor.
But then you have to look at Manchester. So Manchester 5 years ago, to me, was the place to invest because you got in at a decent, level. Yeah. So you brought at the right time, and rode that wave. But right now, you know, you don't want to buy in the growth zones, for example. You don't want to buy where it's already happened. Well, it depends on what you want. That's not how I invest. I like to understand what's happening, take an informed decision based off conversations with, you know, the local council, planning, things like that. I look at application success rate, I look at population, I look at visitor statistics, I look at, you know, what's going on within that area. Overall, crime, schooling, everything.
And what we can do from a software perspective, not just us, but any kind of software vendor should be able to look at things like, obviously, income expenditure.
Yeah.
Voids is a big area.
Absolutely.
You know, voids are, you know, can kill an investment.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you know, our type of industry should be able to, again, help make that informed decision.
Good. Well, I think I'm going to tell you what my bank manager used to tell me, and he used to say, you know, property is not a 5-minute business.
It's not.
Don't ever think it is.
It's not, but that doesn't mean to say that we can't take money from it now and still benefit from it in the future.
No, that's true.
So
that's true.
Yeah.
Okay, Richard, we're going to move on to your second question, which is, I run a small independent estate agency, and I'm wondering to what extent I should introduce digital technology to help me run my business. We are fairly efficient on our accounting and portal integration disciplines, so in what other areas could effective software assist?
Well, in all sorts of areas. To be specific, the technologies you're talking about are the future is AI and machine learning. But software vendors need to invest in the structure of their data to be able to use that technology. But the here and now, I would say, look for, you know, if an agent, a small independent, wants to scale up, they would want to take advice on how they can automate various repetitive business processes, for example. So a small agent might have 3 or 4 people in the office. How can we minimize what admin those 3 or 4 people do so they can focus on what the agency needs them to do to scale, which is sell properties, let properties, get new landlords. Stock's obviously always the biggest challenge. But again, there's only so much of that is within your control. So I would say adopt some good automation software. I would say make sure you're on top of your compliance, particularly as a small independent, although let's face it, if you're a small independent or a corporate, you don't want to miss a gas expiry certificate date. that should go without saying. So I guess efficiencies, being on top of compliance, automating processes is relative to the size of your agency, whether you're a small independent or a large corporate.
Okay, things like voice search, things like are the portals using that as a normal function now?
Voice search in the property industry, like many technologies in the property industry, are in their infancy. There's only a small amount of us looking at voice search at the moment, but the statistics around voice search are undeniable. In terms of growth, in terms of people having devices in their homes, using those devices, what the sequence of using those devices are, how much more inclined a voice search is to turn into an inquiry. So there's lots of positives, and again, voice search in the future, AI, machine learning, better data. Again, I would say data is probably the biggest challenge in the property industry for agents.
Okay, Richard, thank you very much for that. Well, that's all we've got time for today. So big thank you to Hayley Andrews.
Thank you.
Thank you for driving all the way down from Birmingham.
No problem. Pleasure.
Richard, I hope you've enjoyed your first show with us. Your answers have been very good, very helpful. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Don't forget, if you have any questions for our panel of experts, do write in or do contact us through the website, propertytv.uk. I'm Stephen Galpin. Look forward to seeing you next time on Property Question Time.